Hello and welcome to LG Classics. This post is from the subreddit Wedding Shaming and it's by user Deleted. Bachelor Party Sobriety Check. I went to college with Benny. We had a large group of friends pretty much all through our undergraduate years, resulting in some tight bonds. About 5 years after we graduated, Benny met Karen. They hit it off. Benny had been doing well for himself. He had quickly risen to a position of responsibility at a large tech company, was making a good living, and had purchased a home prior to meeting Karen. Benny was a beachy sort, who kept a camper at a campground near the beach where he would surf and fish pretty much every evening after work, almost year-round, enjoying that California coast. For context, he would spend so much time at the camper that friends who lived near his house would swing by and bring the mail in for him. This was widely known. He would share his house with friends visiting from out of town. Friends had even crashed in his house for months at a time between jobs or while moving. Benny and Karen develop a relationship. They dated for a year or so and then Benny proposes. With that proposal, I stopped seeing Benny with any regularity. It wasn't long before the camper came home to be parked in his driveway. It was later sold because we never use it. During his engagement, I saw Benny maybe 3 times, always with Karen. The bachelor party comes and some plans are made. The plans are later rejected by Karen. New plans were made by the best man for a comedy club and dinner. People in attendance to the bachelor party included parents, friends, men and women, and even children, because Benny was always about inclusion. Everyone is invited or nobody is something he would say. Despite all of this, Karen was still unhappy about the bachelor party. At the end of the night, I wound up driving Benny back to his own house. I was also driving home 2 of our friends. We pulled into Benny's driveway at around 9 p.m. I watched as Benny got out and walked to his front door. I always stay and wait for people to get into their homes safely before driving off, and that night was no exception. Benny walked to his own front door to the house he alone owned and which he paid cash for when he purchased it. He reached out and rang his own doorbell. When there was no response, he knocked. I was confused by this and asked the other 2 passengers in my car if he had forgotten his keys. One of our friends said no, that Karen had not allowed him to take keys to the house with him. Karen eventually answered the door and blocked the entrance. Her arms were crossed as she glared first at Benny, then at me. She was saying something that we couldn't hear. Benny then seemed to take a breath and blow into her face. Karen stood there as if in thought, then finally let him into his own house. No one heard from Benny for several days. Phone calls and email went unanswered. This was before smartphones, back when text messages cost 10 cents each. Finally, I heard from one of the other people I drove home that night. He had all the gossip. What follows is a combination of what he told me and what I later came to learn from other sources. Karen didn't like that Benny had a bachelor party. She was invited and encouraged to go, but she refused. She felt that Benny should have stayed home to take care of her instead. Despite being someone who drank, she disliked when Benny drank. She disliked when he relaxed, really. He did blow into her face that night. She was checking for a scent of alcohol on his breath. She apparently had told him that the only reason he was allowed in to his own house that night was because she didn't want to emasculate him in front of his friends. After entering the house, she made him take a breathalyzer to see if he had consumed any alcohol. Despite telling her that he had a couple of beers, she insisted on this, and when it returned a positive result, she tried throwing him out of his own house. He ultimately slept on the sofa that night. The situation degraded further with him coming home from work, unable to get into his own house. She had changed the locks and told him to sleep on the patio. He went to his parents' house instead. Did he eventually marry her? Yes. Now, let's check out that update. Benny and Karen had their wedding at a church with beautiful stained glass windows that towered over the altar, and their reception at a beachfront venue. About 2 months or maybe even a little more had passed between the bachelor party and the wedding. During that time, I had only laid eyes on Benny 3 times, once in passing and twice when I showed up at his door but was denied entry because we're going through something right now. A few days before the wedding, our group of friends received an email from Benny, the first email since the bachelor party, asking us to be on our best behavior during the reception, that Karen was on the warpath and was convinced that we were all, his friends, family, her father and brothers, his brother and nephews, his mother, covering for him cheating the night of his bachelor party. I was surprised because I couldn't figure out how he was supposed to have cheated, which he had no history of doing. When he was surrounded by people she knew from the moment he left the house until the moment I dropped him off. Both the accusation and the email seemed weird to me. The wedding ceremony was largely uneventful. They had over 200 guests. The venue was beautiful. Everyone, including the bride and groom, seemed happy. The drama started at the reception. At some point during the reception, Benny was out on a balcony talking with some friends. I was among them. After a few minutes, before I could even get any gossip or news out of him, a somewhat frazzled-looking bridesmaid rushed over to us and told Benny that Karen was upset and wanted him inside. What followed was a tense and loud 5 minutes where Karen yelled at Benny for ignoring her on her wedding day. This wasn't a scene, it was at a volume with the music playing in the background where I was wondering how many people were politely ignoring it, but it wasn't like the music stopped and everyone gasped. Nobody fainted from the shock and surprise of it, most people seemed to miss it entirely. She was visibly upset, but everything calmed back down. With our group of friends at the time who were getting married, having a cigar roller at the wedding was something a lot of them opted for. When he received a cigar and lit it, this was outside on this elaborate balcony porch thing that wrapped around the side of the venue. That triggered Karen. This time, she was outside in her wedding dress yelling at Benny to stop. This time, everyone who was outside or near the doors heard it, which he did. The last thing I heard him say was, $2,100 for that and you won't even let me enjoy it. That day was basically the last time I ever saw him in person. A lot of us had relocated to the Northeast since then, him included. Karen was from Rhode Island and she wanted to be closer to her parents, so they relocated to a suburb of New York City, as did many folks in our group of friends. Someone we both knew mentioned that he thought he saw them driving to the Orient Point ferry once and that they had a kid with them, which led us to learn that they had a child. It's been many years, and they're still married. I've heard that they seem happy, that she didn't keep him on a short leash anymore, and that he has a new group of friends. This made me wonder, were we the problem? Was the lifestyle our group of friends lived something she had a problem with? One thing I will say is this. Karen comes off as really bad in these stories, but Benny wasn't exactly perfect. While he was successful, he struggled to remain focused on things outside of work and surfing and fishing. Despite the negativity and her insecurity, Karen did bring a measure of stability and direction to his life, for better or for worse. Benny was also the first member of our group of friends who disappeared after getting married. Others would follow, people with seemingly positive relationships. For a while it seemed like we'd go to a wedding, we'd see married friends who we had not seen in a while, and we would look at the friend getting married knowing that they, too, would most likely transition to someone from our past. There's probably a life lesson in that, involving focusing on family instead of just on fun and career. Or maybe there's a coming of age thing tied to weddings that I haven't been cognizant of, given I married when I was already over 35.
Thanks for strolling down memory lane with me on LG Classics. Hope you'll stick around for more throwback vibes.